Every time traffic gets worse, the solution seems obvious. Build more roads, add more lanes, widen the highway, and yet traffic almost never improves. In many cases, it gets worse. This is not a coincidence. It is the predictable result of how transportation systems actually work. Across cities and countries, governments keep repeating the same strategy. When roads fill up, capacity is added. More asphalt, more lanes, more interchanges. On paper, this should reduce congestion. If a road can carry more cars, traffic should move faster. But real-world data shows the opposite. New roads do not eliminate traffic, they create more of it. This effect is known as induced demand. Induced demand means that increasing road capacity makes driving more attractive. Trips that were previously avoided suddenly seem reasonable. People drive at peak hours instead of off-peak. They choose cars instead of buses or trains. They live farther from work. Each individual decision makes sense, but together they refill the road. At first, traffic improves, commute times drop, congestion eases. Then behavior changes. More drivers appear, new trips are created, traffic returns to its previous level. Sometimes it becomes even worse, because once additional lanes are added, they do not just attract existing drivers, they change long-term decisions. When a commute becomes temporarily faster, people move farther away. Developers build housing in cheaper land outside the city. Office parks relocate near highway exits. Retail follows rooftops. What began as a transportation project quietly becomes a land use transformation. And land use determines traffic far more than road width ever could. A dense neighborhood generates short trips. Many of those trips can be walked. Some can be taken by transit, only a portion require driving. A low-density suburb generates long trips. Nearly all of them require a car. When highways expand, they make low-density development possible at scale. And low-density development hardwires driving into everyday life. This creates a feedback loop. More roads enable sprawl. Sprawl increases driving distances. Longer distances increase car dependence. Car dependence creates political pressure for more roads. Over time, the entire urban structure reorganizes around the assumption that everyone drives. At that point, traffic is no longer a temporary congestion problem. It is the operating condition of the system. There is also a physical constraint that road expansion cannot overcome: interactions between vehicles. Traffic flow follows a fundamental rule. As vehicle density increases, speed decreases, but the relationship is not linear. At low densities, cars move freely. At moderate densities, small disturbances begin to ripple backward. At high densities, flow collapses. This is why traffic jams can form without any visible cause. No accident, no construction, just density. Adding lanes increases capacity, but it also decreases merging points. Every merge forces drivers to adjust speed. Every adjustment creates a micro delays. Those micro delays are compound. The wider the highway, the more complex the interactions become. And eventually, a single bottleneck determines the throughput of the entire corridor. It may be a bridge, a tunnel, a downtown exit, an interchange. No matter how wide the upstream highway becomes, that bottleneck sets the maximum flow. This is known as the bottleneck effect. In many cities, highways were expanded for miles, only to funnel into the same constrained downtown streets built a century ago. The capacity increases upstream, the constraint remains downstream. Congestion simply relocates. There is an economic dimension. Driving in most cities is heavily subsidized. Roads are funded collectively through taxes. Parking is often underpriced or free. The true cost of land dedicated to parking is rarely visible. When the price of something is artificially low, demand increases. If every driver paid the full marginal cost of road space during peak hours, traffic volumes would dramatically fall. But politically, charging directly for road space is difficult. Expanding roads feels like giving voters something tangible. Pricing roads feels like taking something away. As a result, supply keeps expanding while pricing remains disconnected from scarcity. This combination guarantees overuse. There is another misconception about traffic. the belief that congestion is purely a failure of infrastructure. In reality, some congestion is a sign of economic activity. Busy roads often connect productive places, employment centers, commercial districts, ports. If a city is growing, travel demand will grow with it. The question is not whether movement increases, it is how that movement is accommodated. Roads are spatially inefficient. A single highway lane can move roughly 2,000 people per hour in cars. A dedicated bus lane can move significantly more. A rail line even more than that. When space in cities is limited, the mode that uses space most efficiently becomes critical. Expanding highways consumes enormous land area. Interchanges alone can cover the equivalent of multiple city blocks. That land could otherwise support housing, offices, or public space. So road expansion carries an opportunity cost. It locks valuable urban land into a single mode of transport. There are real-world examples of this dynamic. In Houston, multiple highway expansions have taken place over the decades. Each time, congestion initially improved. Each time, traffic volumes increased to fill the new space. In Los Angeles, one of the most extensive highway systems in the world coexists with some of the worst congestion. In contrast, cities that focused on transit investment and land use reforms saw different outcomes. When alternatives become reliable, some drivers switch modes. Not all, but enough to change the equilibrium. This is the key insight. Traffic is not eliminated by adding space. It is reduced by shifting incentives. If driving is the fastest, cheapest, and most convenient option, it will dominate. If alternatives become competitive, demand redistributes. There is also the issue of time. People have a relatively stable travel time budget. On average, humans are willing to commute a certain amount of time per day. When roads become faster, people do not necessarily save time. They often travel farther instead. The commute duration stays similar. The distance increases, which means vehicle miles traveled expand even if time does not. As distances increase, daily life becomes geographically fragmented. Homes are separated from jobs, jobs are separated from schools, schools are separated from retail. Every activity requires a trip, and when every activity requires a trip, the number of trips multiplies. A compact city might generate shorter commutes, but a dispersed metropolitan area generates more total vehicle miles even if population stays constant. This is why traffic growth often outpaces population growth. It is not just more people, it is more distance per person. And distance is what consumes road capacity. There is also a psychological factor at play. When a new road opens, it signals opportunity. It suggests accessibility. It suggests convenience. It suggests speed. Developers respond to that signal quickly. Large parcels of inexpensive land near new interchanges become attractive for housing subdivisions, distribution centers, and commercial complexes. These projects are often approved because they expand the tax base and appear economically beneficial. But each one increases dependency on the same corridor that was just expanded. The road solves yesterday's congestion while quietly creating tomorrow's. Freight movement adds another layer to this system. Modern supply chains rely heavily on trucking. E-commerce has increased the number of delivery vehicles on urban roads. Warehouses are often placed near highways for efficiency. When highways expand, logistics networks expand with them. More truck traffic joins passenger traffic. Heavy vehicles reduce average speeds and increase road wear. That wear accelerates maintenance cycles. Maintenance introduces lane closure. Lane closure reduces capacity, and reduced capacity increases congestion. The system feeds back into itself. There is also the concept of peak demand. Road networks are typically designed around rush hour, yet rush hour represents only a few hours of the day. For most of the time, highways operate below maximum capacity. This creates an expensive imbalance. Billions are spent to accommodate short peak periods, even though the infrastructure sits partially underused for much of the day. Because road space is rarely priced dynamically, there is no strong incentive for drivers to shift travel outside peak hours. Everyone chooses the same convenient window. The result is synchronized congestion. Some cities have experimented with congestion pricing to address this imbalance. By charging drivers during peak hours, they introduce a signal that road space is scarce. Even modest charges can reduce peak traffic volumes significantly. Not because people stop traveling, but because they adjust timing, route, or mode. When even a small percentage of drivers change behavior, traffic flow improves disproportionately. This is another non-intuitive aspect of traffic systems. They are highly sensitive to small changes. A reduction of 5 to 10% in vehicle volume can dramatically improve speeds, but adding 5 to 10% more vehicles can collapse flow entirely. This asymmetry asymmetry explains why adding lanes often fails. The additional capacity invites just enough extra demand to push the system back toward instability. And once instability returns, speeds decline rapidly. There's also the matter of safety. Wider roads encourage higher speeds. Higher speeds increase crash severity. Crashes create sudden capacity reductions. Even a minor collision can reduce effective lane capacity by half. The more vehicles on the road, the greater the statistical likelihood of incidents. Incidents generate shockwaves. Shockwaves create secondary congestion. So, paradoxically, building roads designed to move traffic faster can introduce volatility that slows the system down. Over the long term, infrastructure funding becomes another constraint. Highway expansion projects are extremely expensive. Land acquisition, engineering, materials, environmental mitigation all add up. When budgets are finite, money spent on expansion is money not spent on alternatives. Transit systems may remain underdeveloped. Bike infrastructure may remain disconnected. Sidewalk networks may remain incomplete. This reinforces car dependency, and dependency ensures that any increase in road capacity will be consumed. There is also a generational dimension. Transportation infrastructure lasts decades. A highway built today shapes development patterns for 50 years or more. Children grow up in environments structured around driving. Businesses select location based on highway access. Investment follows accessibility. Once those patterns solidify, reversing them becomes extremely costly. This is why early planning decisions matters so much. The first expansion often sets the trajectory. From a political perspective, expanding roads is often easier than restricting demand. Road projects create visible construction jobs. They can be framed as growth-oriented. They produce ribbon-cutting ceremonies. Demand management strategies like pricing or parking reform lack that visibility. They are often misunderstood as punitive rather than corrective. So even when evidence shows that expansion will not solve congestion long-term, the incentives for decision makers can favor it. There is also a misunderstanding about what solving traffic would actually mean. In a growing metropolitan area, eliminating congestion entirely would imply either massive overbuilding or reduced economic activity. Neither is realistic. Some level of congestion is inevitable in dynamic urban systems. The goal is not zero traffic. The goal is efficient movement. Efficiency does not necessarily require empty highways. It requires stable flow, predictable travel times, and multiple viable modes of transport. When alternatives exist, road networks function more smoothly because they are not carrying the entire burden of mobility. This shifts the framing of the issue. Traffic is not simply about cars competing for space. It is about how a city allocates scarce land, public funding, and travel incentives. When most trips require a car, roads will fill up. When some trips can be shifted to other modes, pressure on roads decreases. People assume traffic is caused by insufficient infrastructure. In reality, it is often caused by infrastructure that shapes behavior in ways that generate more demand than it can sustainably handle. Adding more of the same input does not change the equation. It reinforces it, which is why building more roads rarely produces lasting relief. It expands the system's capacity in the short term, but it also expands the system's appetite. And over time, the appetite wins.